Hello, and thank you for tuning in for what we hope to be a compelling and exciting interview with one of the last remaining, or actually the last remaining, founding father of Ryukyu Kempo in the United States. My name is Anthony Carnamola.
And I'm Ken Peters. I'm here with Hanshi Geraldi, senior student of the late Oyata sensei. A little bit of his background: he's a former Green Beret, Special Forces, and served in the early stages of the Vietnam conflict. Retired New York City Transit police officer, an academy instructor, and a martial arts teacher here in the United States for over 55 years.
Yeah, Hanshi, welcome. Thank you for taking the time. It's really an honor for Kenny and myself to have been your students for the better part of our lives. It's really exciting for us to really have the opportunity to speak to you today and give you a chance to really tell your story. So with that.
Good. I want to thank you both for organizing and establishing this. A lot of times you remain silent because of respect for others, and you create a vacuum. And once you create this vacuum of silence, other people start filling in for information that's really erroneous and not really truthful. Before we go any further, okay? A lot of people may say, well, he's too old and his memory is not accurate, and I might not have factual information. Back in the 70s, Jim Logue, Bill Wiswell, and myself, we were going to write a book by Taika, and Taika dictated history, personal events in his life, techniques, instructors, and in a manuscript. And to verify it, he signed the back of the manuscript. So every once in a while, I read this manuscript. It's like hearing Taika talk again. Jim Logue might have it, and I'm not afraid of anybody producing the manuscript, because all they'll do is verify any comments that I would make.
Tell us a little bit about how your journey began and how you met Oyata and your time as a Green Beret.
For the military, and they would pay karate teachers $5 a student if they taught the military. Taika was teaching for Special Forces barracks, and he would always say this, I teach Special Forces, I'm #1 teacher. And I said, yes, Sensei, you're #1. So just by accident, I walked into his school and I started taking lessons.
I remember one story that you told us over and over, and it never gets old hearing great stories. When you borrowed a gi from someone, it was like an old dirty gi, and you walked into the dojo.
So my first lesson walking in at Taika's dojo, I wore an old gi borrowed from one of my team members, and he had writing on his shoulder. So there I am, peacefully stretching my legs on the side, and a black belt comes over to me and says, all new students have to fight Sensei. Lucky I was in Special Forces. I said, this is an awful hard sport, to get into this. And sure enough, they strapped me into the chest protector. They put on these gloves. They put the iron mask around my head, and I had a face-off with Oyata. So what'd I do? Frank Sinatra, Manchurian Candidate. What? Oh, I'm going to survive over here. I'm going to survive. The only thing I could do was kick him in the leg. So I stepped in, kicked his leg. He buckled. I stepped back again. I was really frightened, okay? I was moving around with this mask on. It was like jumping out of a plane. Moved around again, moved in, I kicked his leg second time. Black belt comes over, whispers in my ear, Sensei doesn't like being kicked in the leg. I'm surviving here. I'm surviving here. The third time I kicked him in the leg, he looks at me, he kicks me in the center of the mask. That didn't hurt. The whole dojo went gray. I flew back. I smashed into the concrete wall. That hurt.
Okay. Tell us a little bit more about kind of how things evolved, your training on Okinawa while stationed there as a Green Beret, and just your overall experience and exposure, even to Nakamura Sensei, which I think is a critical part of the lineage, and the fact that you actually have Menkyo Kaiden signed and sealed teaching papers from really 3 of the Okinawa masters, or 4. You could elaborate on Uehara, Yokima, or you can correct me on the name, I don't remember, Nakamura and Oyata Sensei.
Yeah, well, in those days when we first started out, Oyata was 37 years old. He was a 5th dan under the All Japan Karate Association, and I said, "Why do you belong to the All Japan Karate Association? Isn't Nakamura a master?" He said, "Oh yeah. If you have an Okinawan master, karate started on Okinawa. Why do you belong to the All Japan Karate Association?" About 2 weeks later, Taika comes into me and says, "I have a good idea. We break off from Japan and we start the All Okinawa Karate Association." That's a very good idea. So that's when they broke off. They formed the All Okinawan Kempo Karate Association under Nakamura, and they reorganized their organization.
Can you tell us a little bit about your relationship with Oyata and how things changed when he arrived here in the USA?
Yeah, not to be disrespectful, when he came to the United States, it was a new image. On Okinawa, he, sort of like an Asian pirate, and he was the bouncer of his tea house area. He used to protect the owners there, and a very hard fighter. Everybody.
So Hanshi, there's a lot of Ryukyu Kempo all over the internet. And we see even in Wikipedia a description of what Ryukyu Kempo is. And it's often referred to as a generic name or a generic form of karate. Is it really generic, or is it truly a unique style? And maybe even elaborate on what the difference is between Kempo and karate.
Why did Nakamura choose the name Okinawan Kempo? Okay, so Nakamura's teachers studied with the Chinese military envoy. His name was either Kusanku, or they decided to call the kata form Kusanku. And there's no interpretation of that. It might be old Okinawan dialect or Chinese. So since Nakamura's teachers studied with the Chinese military envoy, he decided to call his system the Okinawan Chinese hand. Now you go to the symbol, Ryukyu Kempo. Kempo means Quan Fa, fist law. And the interpretation, when the Okinawans actually look at the characters of Kempo, Kempo is a Japanese translation of the word, but the actual characters are Chinese. And when an old Okinawan would look at the characters, they would say, this Chinese hand, actually calling the old Chinese characters. So, Okinawan Kempo was Nakamura's selection of his system name. When we came to the United States and we started practicing, we were using Okinawan Kempo. Nakamura's death, we lost the sanction to use it because of respect for the family retains the name. So at that point, we decided. Bill Wiswell had a business called Ryukyu Martial Arts Supplies. So Jim Logue, Bill Wiswell, and myself at a meeting in New York decided we're going to call it Ryukyu Kempo, which was Lu Chu Quan Fa, the old Chinese characters for the name. Kempo has never been a generic term. It is always described as a unique form of fighting. The old masters in their books will even say, Kempo is different from the karate that was taught then. although now it's like a gigantic soup, and you're mixing all the meat in there. You can't tell if it's chicken stew or beef stew. It's like all the systems and techniques are mixed in there. But it has never been used as a generic term, only in the United States. Briefly, I'll go into the pronunciation. In the early stages of martial arts in the country, when it first started, they were using a slang term, a mispronunciation, Kenpo. And that was like an American spelling of it. Ken in Japanese is sword, meaning sword. If you actually listen carefully to the pronunciation of the word, you'll hear Ken Po, a middle accent of the M. So actually, if you wanted to generically write it down, you would put Kenmpo as an accurate pronunciation of the
Interesting.
word.
Very interesting.
Cool. So, just subsequent to that, in later years, Oyata introduced something called Rute. Is Rute Ryukyu Kempo? What's different about that?
So we established the name in 1974. Oyata came off the plane. He said, "What do you call your system?" I said, "Ryukyu Kempo, Sensei." He said, "Okay, that's okay." He was still using Okinawa karate up until the 80s. You could tell by his patches. If anyone has the old patches and stuff, there's Okinawan Karate Do. And he was never using Ryukyu Kempo. But later in the 80s, when he broke off from Uehara organization, he started using Ryukyu Kempo, which was the name we had established, and we were running schools already in the United States. So he started putting it on his patches, and the patch was Kyosho Jitsu, Tuite Jitsu, Ryukyu Kempo. So he said, good.
All our original
he's
certificates have that crest.
Yeah, so he's publicizing us, it was great, great. But then it got out of hand, and he started, his certificates said Ryukyu Kempo on them, and people thought, well, I have a Ryukyu Kempo certificate, and I'm promoted under Taiko Oyata, so I have right to the name. Actually, you don't. Out of any respect of dignity of yourself, if I don't know you and you don't belong to the original organization, I mean, if I have a Shotokan certificate and rank, I'm a second dan on the show. Can I say my style is Shotokan? Or now Okinawan Kempo? I can just say, oh, I can use Okinawan Kempo now. No, you can't. But if you have no dignity and no self-respect, call yourself Ryukyu Kempo and don't give us any credit for establishing the organization. Lucky I'm not angry.
Well, I think one of the purposes of what we're doing here is to tell your story, right? And like you said earlier in the beginning, being silent isn't necessarily your strong suit, right? Within the group, and Kenny and I have really been privileged to hear the stories and be under your mentorship and tutelage for greater than 30 plus years. And we've heard the stories, and we are really the ones that said, we got to get your voice heard. And I think there's too many conceptions or misconceptions out there of what the truth really is, what the history is. I think people have adulterated it. Can you please elaborate on this? And I think it's important to understand, how does someone really claim to be a legitimate teacher of Ryukyu Kempo?
Yeah,
and then I think to your other question is, what's the difference now? Because now that Oyata is gone, God rest his soul, there's a lot of fragmentation.
Yep, I think what stemmed from the fragmentation is, a lot of, I learned from this person and that person told me this story. They don't know what they don't know because they weren't around when you guys originally created Ryukyu Kempo.